I'd like to welcome everybody to this festive occasion. My name is Dick Capiola. I'm the manager of the Test Engineering Department, and which is the department Ed is going to be working for the next, 2 days, Ed? And then off to greener pastures.
13 hours.
I'd like to start off by introducing our guests of honor. I'd like to start with the better half of this combination here, Marilyn Zweiback. Ed's daughter, Nancy. Son, David. And last but not least, Old Easy. No pun intended. Well, we kind of set a tradition a few retirements ago in the Test Engineering Department, and that who's ever assigned to organize these things goes out and finds the entry employment picture of the person who's retiring and present it to him as part of these festivities. With Ed, we had a bit of a problem. And the best we could do, if I can get this thing done,
Oh, my God.
was probably a midlife picture of Ed. I don't know, you guys can help me with this, John. Short badge, this is probably the 60s, huh?
Yeah,
that kind of short badge?
He never
late
had hair?
60s.
Well, wait a minute. Now, we weren't satisfied with this, and, us testers are pretty dedicated people in getting the real facts on everything. So we did some research, and we used the latest technology, image processing, digital enhancement. I think the best information we received was from the LAPD, and we were able, through the deft hand of Tom Phelps, our resident artist, to construct how Ed really looked when he started working at Douglas. Is that good, Ed?
Generous.
That's pretty suave. Well, I'd like to touch on a few brief highlights of Ed's career. And after reviewing the list of distinguished speakers we have today, I decided not to spend a lot of time on that because I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of details I wouldn't be able to capture from this august body to my left. So I'll just briefly touch on some of the highlights. Ed began his career at Douglas in 1954, the August of 54. And if I can find it here, it all started with a letter from a gentleman that some of these people to my left might be familiar with. I'll read it to you. May 19th, 1954, addressed to Mr. Edgar L. Zweiback, some address in L.A. Dear Mr. Zweiback, as a result of your recent discussions with Mr. J.B. Healy of the Power Plant Mechanical Section, we are looking forward to your rejoining our organization in the capacity outlined below. I should say that Ed, in his college years, did spend some summer work time at Douglas. I believe it was refurbishing C-47s, Ed. And as a result of his great performance at bucking rivets or whatever he was doing, they decided to hire him into the power plant section. Anyway, to go on, the position will be that of flight test analyst at $2.10 per hour, which amount to $432 per month on the basis of a 45-hour work week, which we are now working. As mutually agreed, it states upon, we will anticipate you being able to start your employment with us August the 2nd of 54. Sincerely yours, W.H.P. Drummond, Chief Engineer, Testing Division. I notice this is unsigned, Ed. Have you ever received a paycheck from the Douglas Aircraft Company? You can keep that for your mementos.
Thank you.
Anyway, that started it all with Ed at Douglas. And he's essentially spent his entire career associated with the testing business. His early career was, as that memo stated, a flight test analyst. Worked for Verlin Mars, one of our more infamous characters we've had in the organization. And did a lot of the early work, participated in a lot of early work on some of our fighter planes of that era. He went on, and probably his longest duration in any single job, and a very important one, it turned out, was moving into the area of noise and flyover noise testing into business. This particular area became very important in the early 60s and through on out to today due to the noise situation we find ourselves in around airports. Ed was very instrumental in a lot of development of a lot of technology in the field of acoustic testing, instrumentation, methods, and procedures. He then spent some time as a technical advisor to the organization and has essentially continued in that capacity to the present, where he is the branch manager, or soon be was the branch manager of the Advanced Test Technology Group in test engineering. Along with that, Ed has published many papers that have been published in various journals associated with that particular technology. He is a registered professional engineer, mechanical engineer with the state of California, an associate fellow of the AIAA, and some of his outside activities included leadership roles in the Boy Scouts of America. So with that, Ed, I think I'm going to turn some other descriptive material about you over to our distinguished speakers. And I'd like to start with a good friend of a lot of us and the former director of what was called Flight and Lab Development at the time, retired 4 years, I believe, John. John Hand.
Thanks, Cappy. Thank you. Well, my recollections of Ed go back quite a ways. I'm rather vague when he was up at Edwards, but I have some vivid recollections of when he was one of a tribe of 3 bachelors back at Patuxent. We had quite a gang of people back there. And it got a little dull occasionally, but we could always rely upon the bachelors to liven things up. And there's one other of the 3 that's here tonight, that's Bud Harris and Marilyn, whom he met back there at that time, which broke up the bachelor establishment. But their exploits were renowned amongst not only the Douglas crew, but the Navy as well. But I wondered if anyone here beside Bud knew how it came about that he started wearing a beard, which you've seen him in off and on now and then. He got a very bad cold somewhere in the wasteland of the dark winters back there, and decided after lying in bed for a couple of days that he really needed some nourishment. So he boiled up a pot of soup. And I don't, to this day, know how he managed to do it, but he managed to spill the soup, and he got it on his face, on his chin in particular, burned himself so badly he couldn't shave. And that's when he started wearing beards. I also remember his early courtship of Marilyn. Used to be up at Edwards, and we'd come home on the weekends, and he cozened me into driving across Angeles Crest Highway and dropping him off in Alhambra, I think it was, or South Pasadena, right. Marilyn was teaching at that time, as I remember, and was one busy person, and I'm not sure how the two of them ever quite managed to make it happen, but they did. Anyway, it's been a long and prestigious career for Ed. I think those of you who have known him, and I think all of you have enjoyed his sense of humor. He spurred my wife, Maggie, into embarrassing herself one time when he was sitting beside her at one of the more pompous rollout ceremonies. And they were fairly near the front. Ed kept making rude comments along the way, and he finally broke her up, which resulted in several of the heads in the front row turning around to see what the hell a disturbance was. Anyway, those of you who've known him as well as I have certainly recognize that the one key word to Ed is integrity, professional and personal both. And I've always respected him for that. We've had any number of go-rounds, which we both enjoyed, I think. At least I certainly did, and I think Ed did too, because he seemed to provoke them frequently. But we always came out smiling. And I think it's been a distinguished career, Ed. My congratulations on your having graduated.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is a former boss of Ed's and who moved on to other areas in the company and then subsequently retired as the director of ET&IS, most recently, John Strom.
Well, I did, I guess, have Ed work for me. I really wasn't sure whether I was working for him or he was working for me.
I gave you the benefit of the doubt, John.
That's, thank you. If you know Ed, why, he's a real documenter. He'll document everything. There was no question about whether I knew what was going on, as he let me know in all sorts of ways. So, Ed, I commend you on keeping me up to date. There's a couple of stories. You all know that Ed is looked on at the Douglas Company, I guess, probably nationally and internationally as a key figure in flyover noise testing. And he spent a great deal of time doing that. Now, he had a lot of other interests with the company that sort of paled into insignificance. In his earlier days, he worked on most of the Navy airplanes that came out of El Segundo, and he worked on all of the commercial airplanes that came out of Santa Monica and Long Beach. He even worked on the C-124. I was amazed to find that out, looking at some of his reports. So he's had quite a broad background and a real diverse interests within the company and within the technical world. He also was very interested in the outside world around him. There's a couple of examples I could cite. One of them was in 1976 when he wrote Briz a letter telling him that we ought to let bicycles into the plant. And I think that the reason why that came about really was that Ed took up, in the gas rationing days, took up riding his bicycle to work, and he found out that he couldn't get it any further than the gate. He was locked out, where if he drove his car, he could drive into the plant, out to Building 41. So he wrote this neat memo to Briz, telling him all of the great advantages of bicycles in the plant. Air pollution, efficiency. You probably remember more of those than I do, but that prompted some kind of a big decision from our leaders. It turns out that they didn't think that was such a good idea because bicycles operating in the plant were dangerous, more dangerous than four-wheeled vehicles. So it turns out that bureaucracy finally won out and bicycles were outlawed. But good try, Ed. Another case, in the Boy Scouts. Ed was a Boy Scout leader, and he went to summer camp, I guess, probably on several occasions, but I happened to see a letter that he got back from a fellow named John Hancock, and that has always stuck in my mind that Ed's really traveling in high upper echelons, I guess I'd say. And if you keep that up, Ed, I'm sure you're going to last out retirement in great shape. Congratulations.
Thanks, John.
Our next speaker is also a former director in flight test engineering. He defected. He's now working in training systems and services. Bill DeChan.
Oh, I got pages here.
How many rights are?
2 minutes, somebody said?
2 minutes.
You know, in this business, and in any big business, you judge people from a process which is very strange. You meet many people, you go to many meetings, you have short encounters with them. They say one word or another. Each input is put into your data bank, and eventually you get a perspective of this person. That's kind of the way we have to operate, because we don't, with the way we run, we don't have time for any in-depth discussions. Well, with Ed, it's different. You never got a quick answer out of Ed. There was no offhand remarks. In fact, each encounter was kind of a classroom lecture where you were the freshman and he was the professor, and the stories were all put together. The quadratic equations were solved, objective reasoning pursued, and after hours and hours, he finally had you going his way. That's the way he works. He had and he probably still has, the uncanny ability of reducing any question to mathematical terms. And to back him up on that, he started off, hell, I knew him when he had a slide rule. Then he moved into a calculator and eventually into the computer. And there was a time, too, when he even tried to introduce artificial intelligence into the computer, but he wiped that out because it was against his argument most of the time. So despite this difference of how you obtained a calibration of Ed compared to normal people, your data bank got it all together, and you had to conclude that, one, when you ask him a question, be prepared for a college-level course, and bring your lunch. Two, he utilized mathematical devices as a security blanket, and without a mainframe computer at home, his retirement is going to be unsuccessful. Now, on a more serious note, what did Ed contribute to the industry we're in? Back years ago, when I started testing jets, one of the primary things we tested, and I guess George Mabry is here, he'll know that, was the performance of an airplane in an airport environment. The takeoff, the transition, the initial climb, these were very important parameters and could make or break an aircraft. And at that time, we were dealing with anemic engines and weak brakes and unsophisticated instrumentation. And we all became experts on measuring thrust and accelerations and developing techniques to demonstrate maximum performance. And we cut our teeth on this. We ran hundreds of tests to refine each portion of the airplane flight path. And then along came Ed. And he had this dumb idea that the noise an aircraft makes would govern its performance in the future. And here is this guy lecturing the experts on how to measure performance. And he's saying, forget all that. Forget the VMUs and the thrusts and the RTOs. Concentrate on things like EPNDB. And he said the obscure science of noise measurements was of equal importance to the aircraft's success, and we better suit up with people, equipment, and techniques, or we'd be hurting. Well, in his way, he lectured us on this for a year, and we finally gave in. And we spent the money on microphones and filters and bearded scientists, and he was right. Then he did a lot of struggling with new equipment and new people and new techniques and arguing with engineering on the difference between perfection and practicality. arguing with the FAA on data validation, and continually arguing with us aircraft performance people for another test or another condition or another location to run his test. And today, this is history, as Dick says, that sound level testing is an accepted requirement for aircraft testing. So, Ed, I want to thank you for some of my gray hairs and some of my lack of hairs, for some interesting lectures, and for your contribution to the industry.
Okay, our next speaker comes from outside the testing department, but he has an intimate association with Ed through the subject Bill was just talking about, noise testing. I'd like to have Bob Penley step up here, who is currently the Director of Industry and Regulatory Affairs for Douglas.
How about a sound level check here? Cliff, is this about a 55 dBA level over there at your table? I first met Ed Zweiback when I was assigned back in 1969 to managing our noise reduction technology programs. And one of the first steps I undertook was to meet with the acoustics engineering people and get them to bring me aboard, tell me about the lay of the land, and so on. And they took me through what they thought we were going to have to do to get these airplanes quieted. And they told me about these weird materials they had in mind for applying to the inner surfaces of the fan ducts, which hopefully would absorb some of the fan noise before it escaped from the nacelle out into the communities near airports. They told me about daisy nozzles, which you could put on the back end of jets and somehow would make a whole bunch of small jets make less noise than one big jet, which turned out to be true except in the high frequencies to which the ear is most sensitive. They told me about all these things, and then they said, now, we'll need to get you set up with a meeting with Ed Zweiback. And I said, Zweiback? Who's Zweiback? So, well, he's the guy that has the people who have put together this elaborate system of measuring flyover noise. They have instrumentation up in the airplane. They have instrumentation of various sorts on the ground. They shoot lasers up there to keep record on just where the airplane is, somehow doesn't blind the pilots. And they have a big van down here where they record all these signals on magnetic tapes. Then they take those magnetic tapes and they put them into a big thing he's got out there in Building 41, which is 8 feet high and 10 feet wide, full of black boxes. And out of that comes dBs, on which the company's future hangs. And how does the company's future hang on this? Well, on one hand, we've got the regulators driving down the maximum noise levels that we're allowed to demonstrate in these airplanes. And on the other hand, we've got these demands from the airlines to jack the weights of the airplane up in terms of passengers and fuel and powerful engines to keep the noise up high, and in between is Zweiback. Zweiback. Ought to be easy to find a telephone directory. I remembered from my German, Zweiback. That means twice baked, doesn't it? And that turned out to be kind of a apt description. I never found him going off, never went off half-baked. They said, now another thing you will find out about Zweiback is he is a straight arrow. And I said, straight arrow, that's right. I found out that was true. He was a straight arrow, but also with a sharp point. Stiff feathers, too. And so began my exposure in working with Ed and this strange culture he was mixed up with, my exposure to a bunch of bizarre people responding in a bizarre manner to bizarre circumstances. First one, we got the inside of a DC-8 nacelles all plastered up with this strange material that the acoustics people said was going to absorb fan noise to some extent. And first of all, we had to take the DC-8, rent it from Seaboard Airlines, and put the thing in the air up at Fresno over Ed's microphones and get all these tapes and run them through the machines, get the dBs, and see what the noise level was before we made this installation that acoustics said would quiet the airplane. And Bob Butler was in charge of the operations at that time, as I remember. Took his airplane up to Fresno and had the microphones all set out in the vineyards and flew the airplane over the repeated number of flights, and came back and told me that the newspapers had reported the noise testing that Douglas had conducted on their DC-8, and he got several calls commenting favorably how quiet the noise of the airplane was. Then later, we put in the materials that are going to quiet the airplane down and went back for the second test to see if we, in fact, could demonstrate on Ed's machinery that the thing was quieter. And by George, it really was. You could actually tell that. And we were very proud of it. And the tests with the treated airplane took place on a Sunday morning with this irascible NASA program monitor that we had to contend with, watching over everything. John, and I was standing out there witnessing some of my first tests of the field, of what Ed's people did, and the DC-8 made 2 or 3 runs past on approach, which was a critical problem in noise that we were trying to attenuate. And I looked across this road, and there was this lovely little house over there with a young family out there on Sunday morning working away in their flowers on their shrubs and lawns. And I thought, I'll go over and see how these people feel about this airplane now that they must have known is flying by and quieter. And I said, introduced myself, I'm with Douglas Aircraft, and I guess you've read in the paper about our noise test. Yes, they had. I said, what'd you think about the airplane? And they said, well, we hadn't noticed. It was gone by 3 times. No, they hadn't noticed. And I said, well, it'll be coming by again. Take good notice of how much quieter it is. So we had a little disappointment there. These people hadn't apparently, while working on their flowers on their lawn, really sensed these dB increments that Ed's machinery told us was really there. Well, then the next thing that happened, I was confronted, along with Ed, with the job of trying to get our DC-9s with these gigantic weights that we had to offer to be able to sell the airplane, pass the government microphones, and the certification test, meet these stringent noise limits with these high weights. Looking through the government's book on how to make tests, it said you can't have any thick or heavily matted grass below the microphone. Is that what it says? So that told me that thick and heavily matted grass was a good thing if you could get it underneath the microphone, but we can't make it too thick or too heavy. We're going to go down to Yuma, they tell me, and how much grass is there at Yuma? Well, there isn't any. So I said, well, get some trucks and go over to a nursery, that's the word, and get some grass and transport it over there and send the bill to Wendell Way for the grass and plant it beneath the microphones. Be sure it's not too heavy or too matted. We had a little trouble with the farmer planting Bermuda grass amongst his crops. But then the funny thing was, Wendell Way called me a few days later, and he wanted to have more details from me on this pot party in Yuma that he had a bill for providing the grass for. They took me up to Modesto, where we were going to make some more tests. Getting too dry at Yuma, and we kept getting chased further and further north, where there are more water molecules. It's supposed to do better things for the testing. And they stashed me for a moment out there on a beautiful farm field in the early morning, gorgeous morning. I remember standing there looking out on this beautiful crop, and I heard this airplane coming, and it was obviously not our test airplane. It was a open cockpit biplane coming along very low, coming right at us. I thought, gee, look at that. Look at this guy out there, looking like, making like the Red Baron in his open cockpit biplane. Isn't that great? I wish I was up there. And he came right over my breath as long as I could, which wasn't long enough. And I don't know how much damage was done permanently to me there. Then they introduced me at one point to Oliver Angel out there in the Central, with who is the guy that watches the signals coming from the various microphones distributed around amongst the farms that they'd been able to con the farmer into letting them put their microphones in. And Oliver could tell by looking there at the display whether or not anything amiss was going on at any one of these microphones. And up at Modesto, he was watching all the microphone signals as the airplane was making its repeated runs, and suddenly one of them looked bogus. I guess it went blank, 0. And turns out that they had strung some of this microphone wire across a public highway, and a highway patrolman had come by and spotted this, and he looked in his book of rules, and wires are not permitted across highways without permits. And there was no permit he knew of, so he took out his wire choppers, and chop! There went our noise test from that mic. So they dispatched a truck, found the broken wire. I guess they found the highway patrolman, and he lectured them for not having a permit. And they quickly arranged a permit. Is that right, somehow? Got a permit? You don't remember that? They got a permit, I think. And hooked the wires back and resumed testing. And then, not very long after the echoes of the police car had disappeared and the wires had been repaired, here comes along a crew, highway crew with macadam. They're resurfacing the road. And they covered the wire up completely with macadam, and I understand that didn't do anything to or for our noise signals. Last two stories I'll tell you about was when they got me up to Toledo, where the really up right in Boeing's backyard, lots of water molecules, and the runway was of unknown strength, so the crew was flying the airplane out of Portland and coming up and coming down over the runway, leveling off at a low altitude, and then punching the power and beginning their climb to measure the noise off the end of the runway, since we were studying at that point only the takeoff noise. And those of you who may have been to Toledo will remember how beautiful an area that was, a pastoral scene, lovely fields, millions of Christmas trees in the forest, and there was a pleasant farmhouse right off the end of this runway that had previously been exposed only to the soft lowing of cows and the sound of 145 horsepower Cessnas. So when our first pass went over that house, and we hit that house with 32,000 pounds of thrust, it created severe consternation in the house. There was no control tower on the field, but there was a flight service station, and not too long after the first run, somehow I happened to get over into the flight service station, was chatting with the FAA guy, tending the microphone, giving en route noise, or en route information to transient aircraft. And in comes this agitated woman. She was a mean-looking woman. And she was Mrs. Robb, who lived in that house. And she was complaining about, she was in the house, this airplane came over, tremendous noise level. And this is the airplane we're certifying, you understand? Tremendous noise level. And her husband, who had a very nervous heart condition, just about keeled over from heart exertion. And she had a parakeet that went completely wild and reverberated from walls of his cage, losing a lot of feathers in the balance. And she was really outraged and chewing on this FA guy. And he said, "There's the guy right there." And she said, "Well, I read in the paper this thing was supposed to have a muffler." So I said, "Well, ma'am, you have to bear with us. The government requires we make these tests, and we'll be through in just a few runs, and we'll be out of here, and hope you'll bear with us, etc." And she stomped off mad. So the guy told me, the FA guy said, "No, that was Mrs. Raw. She was in an automobile accident recently and had one of these collars on for whiplash, and she kept it on for 2 years until the case was settled." So I figured we'd be in for a lawsuit for Mrs. Raw, but we never did get one. Last story was the company felt it was desirable to have me go off and tell some of the outraged neighbors around airports what we were doing to quiet airplanes down. And that was quite an experience. Probably the most picturesque was the one over at Los Angeles when the Southern California Association of Governments was looking for a new airport site to accommodate all the growth in traffic expected. And there is lots of cities impacted by noise. A person who is a professional complainer and goes to all the anti-noise meetings and so forth. Can't remember this particular lady's name. I think it might have been Liz. We'll say Liz. And I was kind of warned about Liz, and sure enough, she was in my audience as I was explaining these great things acoustics was doing. And during the course of when I came to the question and answer period, she got up and said, "Mr. Penley, I want to know, why don't you people make these airplanes so they go straight up and keep all the noise right over the airport?" And I thought, how do I explain to this woman about thrust of weight and so on and so forth? And I don't know that I gave her too satisfactory an answer. But then later, she came up to me personally after the meeting and said, "Now, Mr. Penley, I have no complaint with you people in the aircraft industry. I know you're trying to do all you can." Said, "But what bugs me is these pilots who fly the airplanes." Said, "They can fly those things a lot quieter if they just would." She said, "Now, you take a good, conservative, middle-aged pilot. He can fly these things in over my house very quietly. But you take these young bucks who are eager to get the airplane on the ground and jump into bed with one of the stewardesses, and they make all kinds of noise." She said, "Just the other night, I heard this quiet airplane come in, and it was making very little noise, and I called the tower, and I said, tell me, was that last airplane that just flew over flown by a conservative middle-aged pilot? And the tower said, yes. Well, Ed, I want to thank you for having gotten into some of these remarkable experiences, and I want to congratulate you on your retirement and tell you how much of an inspiration it's been to all of us who've worked with you, the way you've demanded logic of yourself and all of us, and best wishes always.
Thank you, Bob.
Our next speaker, we're back to the testing organization, is Lee Barber. He's currently the director and test divisional program manager on the C-17. He has shared plenty of time with Ed, and I'm sure can report on his experiences. Lee?
Hi, Ed. Glad I'm finally got to meet you tonight. I was a little bit late. I'm sorry.
That's good.
By the way, I love your picture.
So do I.
Yeah, that's nice. Marilyn, how do you do? Ed, I don't have the kind of stories that Bob. I don't know if I even want to talk about some of the stories like Penley had, but I do have a couple of comments I'd like to share with you. I was able to get a hold of Ed's bio today to refresh my memory of where he came from and what were some of the things that we were involved with. And it turns out that Ed and I worked together for quite a few years, more years than I realized. I don't know, time went fast or something, but
Time went fast.
must have. I don't know where it all went, but somewhere in the order of 12 years or something that we've been pretty close together. Either he working for me or I'm working for him, like, I don't know. Like John said, you sometimes can't tell. But I know during the period that we were associated, Ed did well with the company, with the organization. He was provided some advancements, and I do know, as a matter of record, that along with the positions and the advancements, that he was well rewarded salary-wise. As a matter of fact, I was looking into the records today, and just during the period that he worked with me, or I worked with him, whatever it was, his salary went from $1,950 to $2,800 a week. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. That it must be 195 to 280. I guess that was it. I don't know.
I've got a better computer than that.
Well, I apologize again. That's still not right. I think what it is it is the 1,950 to 2,800, but that's what he owed the company, rather than that's what the company paid him. You know, there were a lot of years in there where Ed was really going after a lot of equipment, if you recall. You remember when he was putting together his laboratory, and I think that's probably where I got these numbers from, is what he was paying the company for all the equipment he was getting.
Master charge.
Now, for a few seconds, I'm only going to take a few seconds because I really don't have that much material. I was told to hold it to 2 minutes. In my condition, I can't hold anything for very long. But I'd like to, if you want to listen, you can listen to me, but I want to talk to Ed for a minute and see if we can't relate some of our past experiences. Specifically, one experience is the only one I want to talk about, Ed, and I'll never get it, from my memory, of the time that we went out to collect data, and just between Ed and I, we went out to collect PMLM, PMLT, EPNL, OASPL. Remember those days, Ed? And they all took that, and we turned it into EPNDB. Beautiful. Wasn't that fun, Ed? Huh? Wasn't that fun? Damn. And we did all that, if you remember, we did all that using the MALT, the CISA, the CORTAS, the TSAS, and the SAFS. Now that's really when the fun began. Oh, one more thing, and we used a BOAT. BOAT, you say? Boat, you bet. We used a boat, of all things, NAFAC, Atlantic City, New Jersey, doing flyover noise tests. Ed and Ollie, bless his heart, had to get a boat. In fact, I think you bought it, didn't you?
On the spot.
On the spot, he bought a boat because he needed a boat. I'll tell you, and Bob, you appreciate this, a little bit of grass, a little bit of moisture. Went out and bought a boat to get to an island on a lake that had the right location, the right, grass, humidity, and everything, to put a microphone. Those were the days, huh? Congratulations, buddy.
Thanks, Lee. Our next speaker is another longtime associate of Ed's and worked many years with him during these trying period of learning how to develop and measure flyover noise. I'd like to have Ernie Lauder come up.
We took all the stories away.
Well, you didn't take all the stories away. There's too many stories about Ed to take away. I worked for Ed 21 of my 27 years. And one thing about him that's been remarkable, he uncannily has a way to remember everything I forgot. And that was really a gift. As a boss like that, if I had a complete plan laid out for how to do a test on the airplane, if I forgot to take the tape schedule or get that plan put together, Ed would say, "Is the tape schedule ready?" I said, "Oh, I forgot." It's the only thing I forgot out of 100, but Ed remembered somehow. And we had a complete flyover noise test plan. Everything's all squared away and coordinated. It says, "We got a place for the weatherman to stay." No, forgot that one. So then I got an EMA coordination in the last couple of years, had everything all planned, everything all set up again. He says, "You have a copy of that to the EMA engineering coordinator?" I said, "No, I forgot that." And that was the gift he always gave to me. He was precise, as you could hear from all these stories. And one thing that nobody said was he left notes everywhere on everything to show it was working or not working and where it was and what it was. We go on a flyover noise test, there's a sign on everything, and they're all in Ed's handwriting. He'd take these damn signs, he'd put them everywhere. That damn sign, just beer bottle, you wouldn't forget. And so, you got to have one of these. I almost did that. But we have a lot of copiers that work, and they hardly ever work, and there's a light on the copier out there by Larry Crowley's desk, and that light doesn't work, and what's on that light? A sign that says doesn't work, and guess who wrote it? But those things all paid off. What was it that, oh yeah, the idea about equipment. Ed got more equipment bought for a small group than anybody in that company. Cost per capita, his outranked everybody's. He was tenacious. He kept equipment. People, I can't get away from the guy. I've been working here 27 years. I'm the only person in the company that worked for the same man 21 years. So tenacious. Equipment, people, ideas. Man, he hangs on ideas. He doesn't have his own. He gets everybody's ideas, and he keeps them all and puts them together. So that you get to keep also. A tenacious person. And right now we have a lot of things going on in what we call new culture, and that's to empower people to do their job. You heard that song about it was country before country was cool? Ed was new culture before culture was cool. I remember a job, John Hand gave me a job, and it scared me to death. I wasn't too old of an engineer at that time, to coordinate and solve all the noise and vibration problems on the DC-10. Remember that one? And I was shaking in my boots. I even wore boots then, I still do. And I didn't know how to handle it. It was too much for me. And I really was scared. I didn't know how to go about that awesome task. And Ed, the kind of boss he was, I could go in there, and I told him, I said, Ed, I'm scared, I'm spinning my wheels, what do I do? He helped me see the qualities and the talents I had to solve that problem, and I went out empowered. And that's the kind of boss he is. And I was empowered enough I hit up a lot of flyover noise programs, and you've heard about those. I'm not going to recount them. But, boy, I went out there empowered to do the job. And we ever went with RG58 cable. That raft you heard about, it was moored to the shore with RG58 cable. There's lines all over NAFEC and Atlantic City, New Jersey, and any state you can think of in the Union, RG58 cable. So you got to have some of that stuff. And you heard about him looking ahead to the future. I've forgotten who shared it, but the idea that he saw flyover noise having a need long before the rest of the people did. He had a PC on his desk when people thought it was a game. And they laughed at him. That's all people did. What do you got that for? Now everybody wants one. So he is definitely visionary. And, and one thing he taught me, a lot of things he taught me, but one thing was a lot of things come to you fixed. You get dealt a hand or you get certain things, and how you arrange them is up to you. That's what a kaleidoscope does. There's certain things in there that's given to you, but what it looks like and what it's going to become is up to you. And Ed taught me that. He's visionary, and I thank him for it. I guess out of all those things, I'm a better person in every way I can think of. I'm more professional. I'm more precise. I'm a better husband, a better father, a better citizen because of Ed. And I thank you.
Well, this next speaker is an interesting one also, and it's particularly interesting to me since he's one of the other branch managers in my organization, and he just happens to head up the essentially the computing operation in test engineering. And as you heard, Ed is a keen aficionado of those devices. And it's interesting to hear the conversations that go on between Ed and our next speaker, Larry Crowley, who has the responsibility for that. And you might have gathered Ed has some opinions sometimes. And like I say, it's a very interesting experience managing these two folks. Larry?
I have a few things to say, and I don't want to talk about noise at all. Nothing to do with noise. I promised Ed a roast tonight, and I think we ought to have a little roast. The easy, or Ed, that we've all come to know, wasn't always so easy. And Ed, whether you know it or not, at one point in time, for some period, you were a real pain in part of the posterior. I began dealing with Ed somewhere in the mid-'60s when I somehow got involved, mistakenly probably, in an IRAD project. And Ed was considered the IRAD expert. Actually, he was the kind of the chief buggy. He would bug you and nag you about certain aspects of those IRAD projects. Good advice, I'm sure, but boy, it was tough to take then. He was very precise in those days. He had kind of a built-in leather-bound thesaurus that always had the right phrase, and he keeps selecting it, to extreme. But, he was very good in the details, particularly in the IRAD areas. Those were the days when we had Andy Mayhoff and Verlin Marth and Ed. And for those of us like myself who are more inclined towards a poetic type of writing, you could really drive you crazy with the way he wanted you to write those reports. But there was another side of Ed, or a kind of a real side. I ran into Ed and his family, Maryland, I believe, on the trails in the San Gabriel Mountains, I think it was, hiking. And he was a different person there. He was a real person. And And, you know, with the babbling brooks and the wind blowing through his hair. Something like that, I think it was, yeah.
Poetic.
Poetic, very poetic, yeah. He's, another side of Ed is this high-tech, very sophisticated person that he is. You wouldn't believe the corn that he likes, and it isn't vegetables I'm talking about. I don't know how many of you may have heard of a radio broadcast called Prairie Home Companion. Anybody here heard of Prairie Home Companion? A few of us have, I think, yeah. This guy really digs on Prairie Home Companion. He, recently the guy who runs that, you're right, the guy who has that radio show broadcast live from St. Paul, Minnesota, finally retired from that show. And you see what's happened to Ed. He's given it up too. I think it was more than he could take, really. Marilyn, you've heard about, and you know about Ed's love affairs. You probably don't know about profs. Now, profs is a thing that Ed really loves, and I don't know how he's going to get along without it. I've seen it in the last week, and he's gotten very temperamental since Cappy took his PC away from him. But this man profs all the time. You know, Ollie North and Fawn Hall have nothing on Ed when it comes to profs. This guy profs morning, noon, and night. I have more notes from Ed than any other person in the company, all total. I have them filed under notes from Mother. It's an easy way to find them. Ed is a aficionado of jazz music in a lot of different ways, and I think John Hand is also that type. Particularly of an artist called Dave Frischberg, who has such beautiful creations such as My Attorney Bernie, Blizzard of Lies, and other famous pieces that he loves to play. His other love is his Toyota Supra. And there's a change of character, you know. You get Ed into that Toyota and go somewhere with him, and it's, let's see, I gotta clean that up. He really pushes it all the way as far as he can. He loves to take corners at 70, every time. Going to lunch with Ed a few times is really a thrill. He's got the jazz playing, the radar detector beeping, you know. It's really something else. Anyhow, I'm going to stay within my 2 minutes or thereabouts. Ed, it's really been enjoyable working with you. I wish I had more time to roast you. Everybody else was kind of conservative tonight, but it's I'm gonna go on.
Well done.
Anyhow, I have enjoyed working with you. You've taught me a lot, and you have the ability to see through the fog and all the bull that we mutually have to put up with, and it's been a real pleasure working with you. So thanks very much.
Our last speaker has been selected to fill Ed's shoes, unique and strange shoes when he leaves. And I'd like to ask Don Stoddard to come up. Don?
Awful lot of stories have been said here tonight about Ed, and I could probably add some of mine to the work environment. I, too, have worked for Ed most of my 20 years. I guess about 15 of my 20 years at Douglas, I worked for Ed in one way or the other. However, our friendship, and I call it a friendship, kind of transcended work. We both have, I'm afraid, an affinity for computing machinery. And I use that word in its general sense because it was already noted earlier that Ed started off with a slide rule. I guess I knew him with a slide rule because I worked probably for you for maybe 3 or 5 years before we got into the electronic calculators. But I've always been a follower of Ed. He got, in the mid-'70s sometimes, Hewlett-Packard came out with what they called the HP 65. This was a programmable calculator. You could put in, if I remember right, 128 steps on a little card. And at the time, I had a Hewlett-Packard calculator. Mine wasn't programmable. And up to that time,
You didn't have an apartment house.
that's right, I didn't have an apartment house. I didn't have that extra bucks. I had to wait a while. That's how it's always been. But at any rate, I had to wait a while. We were able to communicate, but he was way ahead of me with his programmable calculator. So about a year later, because I'm a follower and he was my leader, I bought an HP 65 too. And then we really had something to talk about. We shared programs, and we were going to write a book once. And it was going to be on the use of pocket calculators for various aspects of noise testing. And I believe, I don't know if it was either David or Nancy, were taking typing, and they were doing the outline or whatever that first chapter was. And we didn't have word processors then, and they were just starting to take typing. And I guess we got too busy at work, and it was kind of a project that kind of fell by the wayside. But it was pretty exciting. I thought, wow, I'm going to publish a book. You know, it didn't come out that way. So we had a lot of fun with HP 65 calculator. We were in a HP users group. Remember Richard Nelson? Oh, yes. He, today, if this fellow who started this HP calculator users group, he would be a real hacker. I mean, he would be into everything. Ed, on that particular organization, was number 51 or something, and I was 56. I don't know if they called us charter members, but when we kind of went on to bigger and better things, they had over 2,000 in the group. Doggone though, Ed left me again. Late 70s, he got one of those PET computers, the Commodore PET computer. It was the first kind of computer that had the keyboard and the screen all in one box. And here I was with my dumb little calculator, and he has this computer. Left me again. So he tried to tell me about it, and we really couldn't communicate too well. We did this. This wasn't just at work. In fact, the phone calls and things like this at night have always kind of entered in to our realm of things. Well, about a year later, I got a PET computer. But I had a better keyboard than you. I had a real typewriter keyboard on mine. Yeah, the old membrane type, and I had twice the memory. I had 16,000 characters of memory in my computer. Today, what we have on our desk are 640,000 characters of memory. So we had a lot of fun trading programs and magazines. We started, he would subscribe to magazine A, I would subscribe to magazine B. And that way we didn't have to both pay the rate. We'd change the magazines, and we've been doing that for a number of years. But doggone, as soon as the IBM came out with a PC, he bought an IBM PC, and here I was with this dumb old PET computer. Now I had to catch up, to the chagrin of my wife. And about a year or two after Ed got his PC, I got a PC. But I got a little better one than him because mine was a little newer. And but he right away started adding things to him. But I thought, finally I got ahead of him. I got a hard disk put in mine, 10 megabytes of memory in that hard disk. And I was ahead of Ed. That was great. I was the leader. He was a follower. Then he went and got one, but he got 20 megs about the time I ran out of memory on mine. But we've shared a lot of programs and a lot of experiences on the computer, and we bought some software in Singapore at about a 95% discount. The last Ed heard from the place that we bought, they were moving somewhere else in Malaysia because they had entered into something called copyright laws in that company or country. But we've really had some good times, and I guess we're not going to be talking as often now, but we're going to have to work something out, Ed. I still want to see the Boston Computer newsletter each month, and I know you want to look at Personal Computing magazine. So I enjoyed being your follower, and it looks like I still am. I'm really grateful for that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. Well, Ed, everybody had a lot of neat things to say about you, and I could only reinforce that. In my brief direct exposure to you over the last 4 years, it's been a very enjoyable and pleasurable experience, and I couldn't say any more than's been said about Ed, his qualities, his influence on my organization, and the help he's given us in doing the tasks we have to do. In appreciation, we have a few gifts here.